The Strange Case of Michelle O'Connell, True Crime Documentary. The house was still. Too still. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. But inside, silence. The kind of silence that wraps around you. Makes you feel exposed. Vulnerable. Sitting there in the dim light, it was hard to breathe. The walls, once familiar, felt different now. Cold. Imposing. There was a weight to the air. The sound of the clock ticking, steady, rhythmic, felt too loud. Like a countdown. Every tick felt heavier than the last. I didn't know what I was waiting for. But I could feel it coming. Something. The room was shrinking. The edges of the walls pressing in, inch by inch. I kept telling myself to stand up. Move. But my body wouldn't respond. I could feel my pulse in my throat, my hands trembling at my sides. The shadows in the corners seemed to grow longer. Stretching. Reaching. And then, the door creaked open. Slowly. Just a crack. Not enough for anyone to see inside. But enough for me to feel the breath of something, or someone. It wasn't just the air that shifted. It was the weight of presence. I didn't want to look. But I couldn't stop myself. I turned, slowly. The room felt colder. The light seemed to fade, just for a second. Was it him? The man in the uniform? The one who had sworn to protect? I couldn't be sure. My heart raced, faster now. A sharp breath caught in my chest. The floorboards creaked again. And then, a voice. Soft, but unmistakable. Why are you still here? I froze. The voice wasn't mine. It wasn't his either. It was hers. Michelle's. A chill crawled up my spine. I couldn't move. The room, the silence, her voice, it all crashed in. And then, nothing. The door was shut. The air, thick with unspoken words, remained. There was no escape. The silence was suffocating. I tried to breathe, but the air felt heavier now. Thick with something I couldn't name. The shadows seemed to close in tighter. My eyes darted around the room, searching for something, anything. But it was all the same. Empty. Cold. I could still hear her voice in my mind. Clear, yet distant. It echoed. Why are you still here? I wanted to scream. But my throat was dry. My mouth, parched. I stood up, my legs unsteady, like I was walking through a dream. But the room swayed, as if the very foundation was shifting beneath me. The walls felt like they were closing in. I reached for the door, but my hand faltered. Something was wrong. I couldn't bring myself to turn the knob. The air around me felt wrong. And then it hit me. The door wasn't the way out. The door had never been the way out. It was a barrier. A trap. A prison. I spun around, desperate. But nothing had changed. The room was the same as it had been the moment I entered. Empty. Silent. I moved toward the window, but the glass was fogged up, clouded with condensation. I wiped at it, frantically, trying to see outside. Nothing. Just the blur of night. And then, there it was. A figure in the distance. Standing still. Unmoving. I could feel my heart skip a beat. It was him. The officer. The one who had been there that night. But this time, his face. His face was hidden. Shrouded in darkness. He wasn't looking at me. But I knew. I knew he was watching. Watching me. Watching everything. And as I stood there, frozen in place, I realized something. The door wasn't the answer. The room wasn't the answer. The truth wasn't outside. It was inside. Inside me. Inside everything that had happened. And for the first time, I understood. The real question wasn't why are you still here? It was how could you ever leave? The air grew thicker, like the weight of the world had settled on my chest. I couldn't escape. I couldn't breathe. The figure outside remained still, its presence haunting the edges of my vision. My mind raced, fighting to make sense of everything. Why was I still here? What was I looking for? And then, as if the room itself had swallowed every ounce of light, a sound broke the silence. A soft thud. Like footsteps on the floor behind me. I turned, but no one was there. Just the empty room, bathed in dim, flickering light. And then the whispers came. Soft at first. Like a distant murmur. But they grew louder, clearer. It was her voice again. Michelle. Not just a whisper now, but a plea. A cry. Help me. The words pierced through me. The room spun, and for a moment, I couldn't tell what was real anymore. The walls felt as if they were breathing, pulsing with each breath I took. I reached out, grabbing at the air, desperate to make sense of the voices. But they kept coming. Echoing. Filling every inch of space. Help me. It was all I could hear now. But the sound, it wasn't just Michelle's voice. It was layered. Distorted. Like there were other voices, others who had been here before. Who had never left. I stumbled backward, tripping over the edge of the couch. Falling to the floor. My heart pounded in my ears. I scrambled to my feet, my eyes darting around, searching for the source. But there was no one. The whispers only grew. Help me, help me, help me. And then, a sudden realization hit me. The whispers weren't just echoes of the past. They were a warning. A warning from someone who had been trapped here before. Someone who had never been allowed to leave. I wasn't alone. And the worst part? I never would be. Not now. Not ever. The truth wasn't just haunting me. It was holding me captive. Just like it had held Michelle. And as I stood there, in the dark, alone, I knew one thing for sure. There was no way out. I froze. The whispering had stopped. But the stillness, it felt worse. Like a heavy hand pressing down on my chest, suffocating me. I could feel my heart pounding, each beat louder than the last. The air was too thick now, too heavy. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. Just silence. And then, a sharp creak. The floorboard beneath me groaned, shifting under the weight of something, or someone. I turned, but there was nothing. No one. I was alone. Or so I thought. Then came the footsteps. Slow. Measured. As if they were purposefully dragging themselves closer, step by step. I turned again, scanning the room in frantic circles. Nothing. But the footsteps grew louder. Closer. I could hear them now, right behind me. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to move. I bolted toward the door, my hands trembling as I reached for the handle. But just as I touched it, I felt a cold breath on my neck. Sharp. I spun around. And there, in the corner of the room, stood a figure. A shadow. It was Michelle. Her face pale, eyes wide and empty. Her mouth open, but no sound came out. She was reaching for me, her hand outstretched, her fingers trembling. I stepped back, heart racing. But then, she collapsed to the floor. Her body limp, as if the life had been drained from her. And the whispers came again. Not just from her, but from everywhere. Help me, help me, help me. But they weren't her words anymore. They were my words. My voice. I was saying it, but I wasn't saying it. I could feel myself slipping. Losing control. The room was spinning again. The walls closing in. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. And then, as if all the air had been sucked out of the room, I heard a voice. Clear. Cold. She can never leave. None of us can. It wasn't Michelle. It wasn't me. It was a voice that had been here long before either of us. A voice that had been waiting. And now, I understood. I wasn't the one who was trapped. I was the one who was keeping her here. Keeping us all here. Forever. The room grew darker. The shadows swallowed everything. And in that darkness, I realized the truth. I was never going to leave. None of us ever would. The darkness closed in, thick and suffocating. I could feel it pressing against me, trying to consume me whole. My skin crawled. The cold was everywhere now, sinking into my bones. The voice lingered in the air, its words curling around me like smoke. Asterisk, none of us can leave. Asterisk. I tried to scream, to fight back, but my body refused to obey. It felt like I was trapped in some kind of nightmare, one where I could never wake up. The shadows moved, shifting in unnatural ways. It was as if they were alive, watching, waiting, closing in tighter with each passing second. And then I saw it. The thing in the corner. It wasn't just a shadow. It was a shape. A figure. A woman. Michelle. But this time, she wasn't standing. She was kneeling on the floor, her head tilted at an odd angle, as though she were listening to something, or waiting for something. Her eyes locked onto mine. Cold. Hollow. Like there was nothing left of her. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, and I froze. I didn't want to look, but I had to. I turned slowly. And there, standing just behind me, was the officer. His face, like hers, was pale, lifeless. He wasn't smiling. But the emptiness in his eyes, those eyes, felt like they were burning through me. I could feel his presence now, like a heavy weight pushing me down, pressing me into the floor. She didn't die that night, the officer whispered. His voice wasn't his own. It sounded hollow. Like it was being spoken through layers of time. I wanted to scream again. But I couldn't. I could feel the coldness creeping in, wrapping itself around me, suffocating every part of my being. I looked back at Michelle. She was standing now. Her lips barely moved. But I heard her words as clearly as if she were standing right next to me. Asterisk, you're one of us now. Asterisk. The room began to shift, the walls warping like liquid, bending and twisting. I tried to move, tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. I was rooted to the spot. Trapped. And then the shadows closed in. I couldn't see. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't hear. All that was left was darkness. I was lost. Forever. And as the last breath of air left my lungs, I understood. The room had never been the prison. It was me. I had been the one who never left. And now, neither would they. The darkness wrapped itself around me like a shroud, thick and suffocating. I couldn't move. Couldn't think. The silence was oppressive, louder than any sound could ever be. It pressed in from every direction, squeezing me tighter, making me smaller. I felt the coldness crawl across my skin, like icy fingers brushing my flesh, leaving a trail of numbness in their wake. The air was still, yet there. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through my chest. It was almost like a distant heartbeat. Steady. Unyielding. But it wasn't real. It wasn't from inside me. It was something else. Something ancient. The shadows seemed to shift, swaying in time with the hum, pulsing like the very fabric of reality itself was stretching. I felt my body shaking, though I couldn't tell if it was from fear or something deeper. Something darker. And then, a figure appeared in the middle of the room. A silhouette, standing in the heart of the darkness. At first, it was just a shape, a blur in the blackness. But then, slowly, it became clearer. I could see the outlines of a woman's body, her face hidden in shadow. It was Michelle. But she wasn't the same. Her eyes, those hollow, lifeless eyes, burned through the darkness, locking onto mine with a gaze that felt like it was pulling at the very core of me. She didn't move. She didn't speak. But her presence was suffocating, like she was all there was left in the world. And then I understood. She wasn't just trapped. She had become the darkness. She was the one who had become it. Her body was an empty shell now, filled with something far older than the woman who had once been alive. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the floor beneath me. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I couldn't break free from her gaze. And then, I felt it. The coldness, the emptiness, filling my chest, my throat, my lungs. Like I was drowning in the void. I gasped, desperate for air, but there was nothing to breathe. Just the hum. The darkness. Michelle. The figure in the corner spoke, but her voice wasn't hers anymore. It was a chorus. 1,000 voices layered over one another, each one weaker than the last, until they faded into a whisper. We are all trapped here, forever, just like you. Her hand reached toward me, fingers stretching, twisting unnaturally, as if they were no longer bound by the laws of the living. The hum was deafening now, vibrating through my bones, making my entire body feel like it was about to shatter. I tried to run. I needed to run. But my feet wouldn't move. I was frozen. As if the very air had turned to cement, anchoring me to the spot. The darkness pressed in, suffocating, until all I could see was her face. Her empty face. And then, her voice again, clear, cold, final. You can never leave. The walls seemed to collapse, the ceiling cracked open, and the floor beneath me began to sink. I was falling. Falling into nothingness. I screamed, but no sound escaped. There was no escape. No hope. Just the endless fall. And somewhere, far below, I heard another whisper. Welcome to eternity. And then, everything went silent. The world was gone. I woke. Or at least, I thought I did. The darkness was gone, but the weight of it lingered, pressing down on my chest like an invisible hand. I opened my eyes, but everything was wrong. The room was dim, hazy, as though I were seeing it through a fog. The walls were cracked and peeling, and the air smelled thick, stale, like something had been trapped inside for too long. I tried to move, but my limbs felt heavy, slow. Like I was wading through something thick, viscous. It took everything I had just to sit up. I blinked, confused. Where was I? It didn't feel like the same place. The floor beneath me was cold, rough, like concrete. I pushed myself up, using the wall for support, my hand trembling as it slid across the uneven surface. There was a door. At the far end of the room. I could see it now, faintly, through the misty air. I wasn't sure why, but something told me I needed to get to it. Needed to leave. I stumbled forward, my legs unsteady. Every step felt like it was taking more out of me. I glanced over my shoulder. But there was nothing. No shadow. No figure. No whispering voice. It was just empty. Just me. But the coldness, that deep, gnawing coldness, was still there, lurking just beneath the surface. I reached the door. My hand shook as I gripped the handle. The room seemed to sway around me, the floor shifting, the walls warping. But I pushed through. Twisted the knob. And the door creaked open. A sliver of light cut through the darkness. I stepped into the hallway. The air felt different here, fresher. Almost normal. But something wasn't right. The floor creaked under my feet, each step sending a shiver through my spine. I turned the corner. And froze. At the end of the hallway stood a figure. A silhouette. It was her again. Michelle. But now she was standing in the doorway, staring at me with those cold, lifeless eyes. Her mouth barely moved, but the words came through, clear as day. You didn't think you could escape, did you? I stumbled back, my heart racing, but my body wouldn't obey. I wanted to scream, to run, but it felt like the walls were closing in again. And then I understood. I hadn't woken up. None of this had ever been real. This place, this feeling, it wasn't just a dream. It was where we all were now. Where I was now. Trapped. Forever. And in that instant, the light from the hallway flickered and dimmed. The walls seemed to close in around me, squeezing tighter, and I could feel it. I could feel the darkness returning. Not just around me, but inside me. I was never going to leave. And neither was she. None of us were. And as the door behind Michelle slowly closed, swallowing the light whole, I heard her voice one last time. Asterisk welcome home. Asterisk. And then, nothing. The door slammed shut with a deafening thud. The light vanished instantly. I was plunged back into the oppressive darkness. It was colder now. So cold, I could feel it in my bones. My breaths came out in shallow gasps, each one harder than the last. I stumbled forward, blindly reaching out, my hands grazing the cold walls around me. I was lost. There was no direction. No sound. No escape. Just the suffocating quiet, pressing in from all sides. I could feel the walls closing in again, inch by inch. The same way they had when I first stepped inside. My mind raced, heart pounding in my chest. I tried to remember what had happened, what really happened. But the memories were slipping through my fingers like sand. All I could hear was her voice. Michelle's voice. Asterisk, you didn't think you could escape, did you? Asterisk. That phrase repeated over and over in my mind, like a twisted mantra. I tried to push it out, but it was impossible. Her words were like chains, wrapping tighter with every breath I took. And then, slowly, I realized something. I wasn't just trapped here with her. I had become part of this place. This darkness, it was mine now. It had seeped into my soul, into my very being. The moment I stepped into this room, I had been marked. The truth was ugly, bitter. I had never truly been free. This place, this prison, it wasn't built of walls or doors. It was built from the inside. It was built from the lies we tell ourselves, from the things we hide deep in our hearts. And now, there was no escape. No waking up. No getting out. Not for me. Not for Michelle. Not for anyone who had ever entered. I staggered backward, my hands pressed to my face, trying to push away the realization. But there was no point. It was already too late. The walls of the room were closing in faster now, suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. And then, the darkness moved again. The floor beneath me shifted, groaned, and began to sink. It was pulling me down. The last thing I saw was Michelle's face, her hollow eyes staring into mine. And then, I fell. Down. Falling into the void. Into nothingness. But it wasn't really nothing. It was the beginning of everything. It was the place we all go when there's no more time. When there are no more chances. And as I sank deeper, deeper into the abyss, I heard the voice again. Michelle's voice. Asterisk, you'll never leave. Asterisk. And it wasn't a warning anymore. It was a promise. I fell, the air rushing past me as though I were plummeting through some endless tunnel. The walls of the tunnel, or whatever this was, were slick and shifting, like liquid. I couldn't stop myself. I couldn't fight the descent. The more I tried to scream, the tighter the pressure around me became, choking off every word. I reached out, desperate for something to hold on to, but there was nothing. Just the endless fall. The darkness. And the cold. The cold was unlike anything I had ever known. It wasn't just physical, it felt like it had seeped into my very soul. I could feel it in my veins, crawling through my bloodstream, freezing everything it touched. I wasn't sure how long I had been falling. Time had lost all meaning down here. The world above, if there ever was one, was gone. There was no past. No future. Just this. This endless void. And then, without warning, the falling stopped. Suddenly. Like I had slammed into an invisible floor. I gasped for air, the sensation of landing almost more disorienting than the fall itself. I blinked, trying to make sense of where I was. But the darkness was even more complete here, a thick, oppressive blanket that swallowed everything in sight. The air tasted metallic, stale. And then, the whispering began. It was soft at first. So faint I almost thought I imagined it. But then it grew louder. And clearer. Asterisk, you're not alone. Asterisk. I whipped around, my heart pounding in my chest, but there was nothing. Just the darkness, stretching out before me. Asterisk, you're never alone. Asterisk. The voice came again, this time from all around me. It was not just Michelle anymore. It was them. The voices of the others. The ones who had come before me. The ones who had been swallowed by this place, just like I was now. Their voices were layered, echoing, hollow and distant. Asterisk, help me. Asterisk. Asterisk, save us. Asterisk. Asterisk, you can't leave. Asterisk. I couldn't make out their faces, their forms, but I could feel them pressing in from every direction. They were here. In the dark with me. And then, a new voice joined the chorus. A low, deep tone that was all too familiar. It was the officer's voice. Asterisk, you're part of it now. Asterisk. I spun, my breath catching in my throat. Where was he? Where were they all? But again, I saw nothing. The whispering continued, growing louder and more frantic with each passing second. The walls around me seemed to shift again, like the entire place was alive in a way that defied logic, that defied reason. The room was changing. Expanding. And I understood, finally. This place wasn't just a place. It was a prison. Yes. But it was also a trap. A trap built by the very darkness that had claimed us all. The voices, they weren't just echoes from the past. They were the future. They were me. And I realized, in that moment, what had happened to Michelle. She hadn't left because she couldn't. She hadn't been taken. She had become this. This thing. Just like I was now. The voices swirled around me, their words tumbling over one another in a maddening chorus. And I knew what they were saying. They were warning me. Telling me the truth. That I had become part of the darkness. That I would never leave. That none of us would ever leave. But she wasn't just standing there, staring at me this time. She was walking toward me, her movements slow, deliberate, as though each step was an eternity in itself. Her eyes were empty, voids that seemed to swallow everything in their gaze, yet there was something more, something darker, there, too. Something, alive. I tried to move, to take a step back, but my legs were frozen in place. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Her lips parted, and she spoke, her voice no longer the soft whisper from the shadows, but clear, sharp, echoing around the room. Asterisk, you are one of us now. Asterisk. Her words sliced through the air like a blade. It wasn't just her voice that filled the room, it was the voices of the others too. All of them. They were here, in this place. All around me. They had been waiting. Welcome to your new home, Michelle's voice said again, but this time, the words felt like chains, wrapping themselves around me, tightening with each breath I took. I wanted to scream. To tear at the walls. To fight. But there was no fight left in me. The room began to spin, the walls warping, twisting like they were made of liquid. I reached for something, anything, to hold on to, but the floor itself was slipping beneath my feet, dissolving into the same dark emptiness that surrounded me. The knocking started again, but this time it wasn't just coming from one direction. It came from all around me. From inside my head. Asterisk, knock. Knock. Knock, asterisk. Each sound was an echo of my own heart, beating in time with the darkness. And then, through the chaos, I saw it. A figure standing at the far end of the room. It was the officer. The same hollow, lifeless eyes. The same cold expression. "You are now part of this place," he said, his voice flat, distant. Asterisk, "You can never leave." Asterisk. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach, and I gasped, trying to draw in air, but there was none. Nothing. Just the oppressive weight of the room, of the others, pressing in on me. I felt my body shift again, my limbs no longer responding to my mind. It was as though my very essence was being pulled from me, being absorbed into the walls themselves. And then, I felt it. The thing that had been lurking beneath the surface all along. The truth. The truth that Michelle had always known. That the officer had known. That the others had known. And that now, I knew too. This place wasn't a prison. It was a cycle. A loop. A never-ending loop, pulling in anyone who entered, trapping them here forever, where they would wait. Wait for the next to fall. Wait for the next to cross that threshold, to join them in the dark. And just like that, I knew my fate. I wasn't going to wake up. I wasn't going to leave. I was part of this place now. Part of the dark. Part of the endless, suffocating eternity that awaited every soul who entered. I reached out, my hands trembling, but there was nothing to grab onto. No hope left. Michelle's voice echoed in my mind one last time, and I felt it, deep in my chest. Asterisk, "You will never leave." Asterisk. And as the darkness closed in, swallowing me whole, I realized the most horrifying truth of all. I wasn't just trapped in this room. I was trapped in the story. In the endless retelling of it. A story that would never end. A story that would always bring in someone new. Someone else. The story would never stop. And neither would I. Forever. The darkness was so thick now, it felt like I was drowning in it. The air was heavy, like it was pressing against me from every side, suffocating me. I couldn't see. Couldn't move. My body felt weightless, floating, but there was no release. No sense of freedom. Just the endless pull of the void. I heard the voices again, faint whispers, growing louder, until they drowned out every thought, every hope. They weren't just Michelle's voice anymore. It was all of them. The ones before me. The ones who had crossed the threshold and become part of this dark place. Asterisk, "You are one of us now." Asterisk. Their words overlapped, blending together into a single, hollow sound. It was the sound of the past, the present, and the future all bleeding into one. There was no time here. No beginning or end. Just this. I wanted to scream again, but my voice was lost. I couldn't even feel my own breath. It was as if my very existence was fading into the dark. And then, in the distance, just beyond my reach, I saw something. A flicker of light. It wasn't bright, but it was enough to break through the crushing blackness. I couldn't explain why, but I felt drawn to it. I started to move, slowly at first, like I was underwater, struggling to break free from some unseen weight. But it didn't matter. I was being pulled. Pulled toward the light. I reached out, stretching my hand toward it, fingers trembling, desperate. But the light didn't grow. It didn't get closer. It was just there. Unreachable. Something was standing in the light now. A figure. At first, I thought it was Michelle, but it wasn't her. It wasn't anyone I recognized. It was a person. But not a person. It was someone who had been lost. I couldn't make out the details. Their features were blurry, distorted, like they weren't fully alive anymore. But there was something familiar about them. Something that made my heart skip in my chest. "Don't reach for it," the figure said. It was a voice, but it wasn't just one voice. It was 100 voices speaking in unison, their words heavy and cold. Asterisk, "You cannot leave. You cannot escape." Asterisk. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. I wanted to ask who they were. What they were. But I couldn't. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. The figure in the light took a step forward, and the light around them flickered, dimmed, until all that remained was the shadow they cast. The shadow stretched, spreading across the room, merging with the darkness, until I was surrounded once again. And then, slowly, the figure faded away. The light was gone. The voices were gone. And the darkness closed in. It was overwhelming. It was everywhere. The silence came next. A silence so thick, it pressed against my eardrums, suffocating me in its weight. I was alone again. But I wasn't really alone, was I? I could feel them. The others. The ones trapped here before me. The ones who had been me. And now, I was them. I could feel it in my bones, in my very soul. The endless cycle was turning again, pulling me deeper, pulling me into the same story. The same trap. The same fate. I had crossed the line. I had entered the room. I had become a part of the darkness. And the worst part? I knew what would happen next. Another would come. Another soul would stumble into this place. And they would take my place. They would step into the light, reach for the promise of escape, only to be swallowed whole by the same suffocating darkness. The same never-ending cycle. And as the last flicker of light disappeared into the abyss, I heard her voice again. Michelle's voice. Asterisk welcome home. Asterisk. But this time, it wasn't a promise. It was a warning. A warning I couldn't escape. A warning that would follow me for eternity. Forever. The words echoed in my mind, drowning out everything else. Asterisk welcome home. Asterisk. But there was no comfort in those words. No warmth. No embrace. It was a cold, suffocating promise. A reminder of what I had become. Of what I had joined. I tried to move again. To fight against it. To break free. But my body no longer obeyed me. It was like my mind was trapped inside a shell that refused to move, refused to react. I could feel it, deep inside, the pull. The pull of the darkness. It wasn't just around me. It was within me now, sinking into my bones, into the very core of my being. I was the darkness. There was no more Michelle. No more officer. No more others. There was only me now. And the cycle. The eternal cycle. I could feel the time slipping away again, but this time, there was no passage. No moments to measure. No hours, no days, no years. Just an endless stretch of nothing. And then, a sound. A faint knock. At first, I thought it was just a memory. A fleeting thought. But it came again. Asterisk knock. Knock, asterisk. It wasn't distant this time. It wasn't a murmur from the past. It was here. It was in this room. Asterisk knock. Knock, asterisk. I turned. I knew what was coming. I knew it before I saw it. A figure appeared in the distance. Slowly, painfully slow, like a shadow emerging from the dark. I couldn't see its face. Its details were blurred, shifting like smoke. But it was a figure. Another one. And then, the voice came. Asterisk, I'm here. Asterisk. It wasn't like Michelle's voice. It wasn't the officers. It wasn't the others. It was new. Fresh. A voice that hadn't yet been touched by the darkness. But it would be. The knock came again, louder now. Asterisk knock. Knock, asterisk. The figure was closer. I could feel the energy in the room shifting again, the space warping as it had before, as if the air itself were alive, pulling this new presence into the fold. You can't stay here, the figure said, its voice echoing through the room like a warning. But the warning was empty. There was no escaping this place. No leaving. No waking up. I knew that now. And soon, this new soul would too. I felt a strange sense of resignation. Not fear, not anger, just a quiet, awful acceptance. This was how it worked. How it always worked. They would come. And they would fall. And they would join us. Forever. The figure stepped forward, its form still blurred, still shifting, until it was standing where I had been not long ago. I could feel it, the change. The moment when this new presence crossed the threshold. They were no longer standing in the light. They were in the darkness now. And as I looked at them, the first real feeling I had in what felt like forever was something that was impossible to name. Perhaps it was pity. Perhaps it was understanding. But I knew what would happen next. I knew that they, too, would lose themselves in this endless cycle. That they would walk the same steps I had taken. That they would become just another voice in the chorus of the lost. I wanted to speak, to warn them, but my voice was gone. There was no voice left here. Just the crushing weight of eternity. Asterisk knock. Knock, asterisk. The figure turned slowly toward the door, its expression still a blur, like it was still trying to understand what had happened. But it wouldn't take long. Soon, the understanding would come. The door creaked open. And the light, so cold, so harsh, cut through the darkness. I knew what it meant. I knew what would happen next. The cycle would continue. Another soul would cross the threshold. Another soul would be claimed. And as the figure stepped into the light, a deep, unsettling calm washed over me. The voices around me were quieter now, their murmurs more distant. And I understood that in this place, in this never-ending loop, there was only one thing that mattered. The story would never stop. It would never end. And neither would we. Forever. The light flickered once more, but it wasn't bright. It was faint, sickly, like a dying star trying to hold on to its last breath. The figure that had stepped into the light paused. For just a moment, there was silence. And in that silence, I felt it. The overwhelming, crushing weight of inevitability. There was no escape. Not for them. Not for me. Not for anyone. The figure stood there, staring into the light, still unsure, still questioning. But the door was closing. The door was always closing. The light was always fading. And as the door creaked shut behind them, I felt the pull again. The pull of the cycle. The pull of the darkness. It tugged at me, like invisible hands grabbing at my very soul. It was too late for the new one. And it was too late for me. And I knew, deep down, there was no next. There was no leaving. No hope. No future. Just an endless stretch of time. The whispers returned, but they were softer now, almost comforting. Asterisk welcome back. Asterisk. Asterisk you never truly leave. Asterisk. They weren't just voices anymore. They were memories, echoes of every person who had been here before, who had crossed this threshold, who had become part of the dark. I could hear their faint laughter. Their faint cries. The new one, the one who had just stepped through, would become part of that chorus soon enough. And they would never even know what had happened. They would only know that they had stepped into something far greater than themselves. Far darker. And as the last remnants of light flickered and then vanished, I felt the weight of their presence, all those voices, all those lost souls, folding around me. A cocoon. A tomb. A prison. And it wasn't just the new figure who was caught. It was everyone. Every soul, every person who had ever entered this place, this trap, this story, they were here. We were all here now. Bound together in this endless loop, this eternal waiting room, where time didn't exist, where nothing mattered except the next person to fall. We would all be waiting for them. We were waiting now. And as the darkness thickened, pressing in from every angle, I realized that I had become one of them. I wasn't just an observer anymore. I was part of the story. I was part of the cycle. There would be no end. There could be no end. There was only this. Forever. The voices began to blur, merging into a single low hum that vibrated through my bones. They were telling me something, I realized, something I couldn't quite understand. You were always part of the story, they whispered. Asterisk, and now, you will always be. Asterisk. And that was when I knew. There was no beginning or end here. There was no escape. There was no me. There was just the dark. Just the cycle. And the endless wait. Forever. The light had vanished. And now, all that was left was the darkness. And I, like all of them, would be waiting for the next one to fall. Waiting for the next door to open. Waiting forever. The weight of the darkness pressed harder now, suffocating me from all sides. But there was no air here. No escape. Only the stillness. The cold. The waiting. I could feel the passage of time, but it wasn't time as I knew it. It was a stretching of existence, an endless pause. A constant loop that stretched on for eternity. There were no seasons. No days. No nights. Just the unchanging darkness. I could hear the faint whispers again, like distant memories calling to me. Asterisk, is this all there is? Asterisk. The question lingered in my mind, but it was only half-formed, barely a whisper of a thought. The voices didn't answer. They never did. And in the silence that followed, I felt the strange sensation again, something tugging at me, pulling me deeper into the fabric of this place. I tried to push against it, tried to find some semblance of resistance. But there was no fight left. I was just another part of the endless web. Another lost soul, waiting for the inevitable. And then, something shifted. Not outside me. Not in the darkness. But inside. A crack. A fracture in the stillness. For a brief, fleeting moment, I felt something that wasn't the crushing weight of the dark. It was a feeling, a pulse. A flicker of recognition. Like the briefest spark of a memory. I couldn't quite grasp it. But it was there. It was faint. But it was real. It's you, a voice said, low and familiar. My breath caught in my throat. I knew that voice. I knew it like I knew my own name. It was Michelle. She was here. Somewhere in this space. In this cycle. Her presence washed over me, filling the emptiness surrounding me. I tried to focus on her voice, to hear her clearly. To make sense of what was happening. But it wasn't easy. It was like trying to listen to a voice that was underwater, distant, muffled, impossible to fully hear. We are all connected now, she whispered. Her words wrapped around me like chains, binding me to this place. Asterisk, we are one. Asterisk. I wanted to scream, to shout, to break free from whatever grip she had on me. But it was no use. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I was part of it. Part of her. Part of the dark. And as the weight of it all pressed in, something in me shifted again, something deep inside. I wasn't just trapped anymore. I was changing. I felt myself becoming something else. Something unfamiliar. The cycle had taken hold of me fully now. And now, there was no return. There was only the wait. And the knowing. The knowing that there would always be another soul. Another one to replace the last. And I would wait. We would all wait. Forever. And in the distance, I could hear it again. The faintest knock. Asterisk knock. Knock, asterisk. The sound echoed in the vastness of this place. And I knew what it meant. It wasn't just a signal. It was a countdown. A beginning. The door would open again. And another would step through. And the cycle would begin anew. But this time, I would be waiting for them. I would be here, waiting for the next. For the new. And as the darkness swallowed the last of the light, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't just lost in the dark. I had become the darkness. Forever. The knocking grew louder, sharper, like a heartbeat echoing in the void. Asterisk knock. Knock. Knock, asterisk. Each sound sent a shiver down my spine, reverberating through me. I couldn't escape it. It wasn't just a noise. It was a presence. A summons. A reminder that this cycle, this nightmare, was always waiting for the next soul to enter. I tried to resist, tried to pull away from it. But the darkness wouldn't let me. It held me here, tethered to this place. The knocking was growing more insistent now, closer. Stronger. It was no longer just a sound, it was a force, a thing, knocking on the door of my very mind. Asterisk knock. Knock, asterisk. And then, the door appeared. Not in the distance. But right in front of me. It was dark, warped, aged with time. The kind of door you see in nightmares, old wood, cracked, splitting at the edges, as though it had been there for an eternity. I could feel the pull. It wasn't just a door. It was the door. The one that had opened for me once, and the one that would open for the next soul. The cycle was about to begin again. The door creaked open, inch by inch, revealing the blinding light behind it. I couldn't see what lay beyond. The light was too bright, too pure, a stark contrast to the darkness around me. I felt a cold breeze, the first real breath of air in what felt like forever, ripple through the space, and it chilled me to the bone. For a moment, I hesitated. Was this an escape? Could this be a chance to finally break free? But even as the thought crossed my mind, I knew the answer. This wasn't freedom. This was just the next part of the story. The door wasn't an exit. It was a gateway. A place of transition. It was the same for all of us who had entered before. I couldn't move. Couldn't take a step toward the light. I was bound to this place now. Part of its endless waiting. Part of the eternal cycle that twisted around us all. The knocking came again, louder now, as if it were urging me forward. Asterisk knock. Knock, asterisk. But it wasn't my hand that would open the door this time. It wasn't my soul that would step through it. I wasn't the one waiting on the other side. There was someone else. A new presence. I could feel them, faintly, a soul not yet bound. They were approaching, unaware of what awaited them. Don't open the door, Michelle's voice whispered, distant but clear. Asterisk, it's never what you think. Asterisk. I wanted to reach out, to warn them. To stop them from falling into this place. But it was too late. The door was already opening wider, the light bleeding into the darkness, filling the room with its cold, harsh glow. And there, just beyond the threshold, stood the next one. A figure, still blurry, still shifting, but I could feel them. Their confusion. Their fear. They didn't know what lay beyond the door. They couldn't know. Not yet. They would become part of the story. They would cross the threshold. They would become trapped, just as I had. Just as Michelle had. Just as we all had. The door was open now, fully. And as the figure stepped through, I could feel the cycle beginning again. And then, I heard the voice of the others, the ones who had crossed before me. The ones who had become lost. Asterisk, you're one of us now. Asterisk. And it was in that moment I realized the truth. This place, this story, wasn't just a prison for souls. It was a waiting room. A place where the past, present, and future bled together. We weren't just trapped here forever. We were always here. Always waiting. Forever. And as the figure stepped further into the light, the door slowly creaked shut behind them. The knock was gone. For now. But I knew it wouldn't be long. Not long at all. The cycle would continue. The waiting would never end. And I, like Michelle, like the officer, like the others, would always be here. Waiting for the next one to fall. Forever. The silence stretched in the aftermath, thick and heavy, pressing down on every part of me. But it wasn't truly silence. Not in this place. I could feel it. The waiting. It never stopped. Never truly went away. The new presence, the new soul, had crossed through the door. The cycle had begun again. But this time, it felt different. Maybe it was the way the light flickered before it faded, or the way the air shifted around me. But there was a sense of something shifting, something changing. And deep inside, I felt the slightest tremor. Not fear, not anxiety. But recognition. The realization that this time, I wasn't just part of the cycle, I was becoming it. The darkness, which had been my prison, my cage, was now seeping into every fiber of my being. It wasn't just around me anymore. It was me. I could feel it in the way my thoughts drifted, disjointed, fragmented, like pieces of a puzzle scattered in the dark. I couldn't hold on to any one thing for too long. I couldn't even hold on to myself. The whispers were louder now. Not just in my mind, but in the room, swirling around me like a storm. And as the voices reached a deafening crescendo, I felt the ground beneath me shift once more. I couldn't move. Couldn't even scream. The darkness closed in tighter. And then, it took me. Just like it had taken all of them. And for the first time, I understood what Michelle had known all along. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Of eternity. The darkness consumed me completely. I couldn't see. I couldn't hear. I couldn't breathe. It was as though I had been swallowed whole by the void itself, erased from the world. For a moment, I wasn't even sure if I existed anymore. There was nothing but a crushing weight, pulling me deeper, pulling me into something far darker, far more suffocating than the space I had already inhabited. But then, it stopped. The weight lifted, just a little. I could feel something now, something like a presence, but it wasn't a body. It was a feeling. A cold, sharp awareness, as if 1,000 eyes were watching me, even though I couldn't see anything at all. I tried to move, but my limbs felt frozen, paralyzed by something I couldn't escape. And then, slowly, something started to take shape. A flicker of light. Barely visible at first. A pinprick in the infinite blackness. But it grew. It spread. And with it, the voices came again. Soft at first, distant whispers, echoing in the emptiness. Help me. Save us. Asterisk, you'll never leave. Asterisk. I didn't want to hear them. I didn't want to know what they meant. But the whispers grew louder. And then the light grew brighter. And the faces appeared. Not just one. Not just Michelle. But all of them. Every face, every person who had been lost in this place, their eyes wide and empty. Their mouths frozen in silent screams. They were staring at me. Their eyes, dark and hollow, empty of life. Just like Michelle's. Just like mine. I could feel their hands reaching toward me, their fingers curling in the air, begging, pleading, for something. For help? For release? I didn't know. But I knew I couldn't escape them. Escape this. And then, the worst thing of all happened. I felt my own hand rise. It was as if something was pulling it up, as if I was no longer in control of my own body. I could feel the cold of their touch, their frozen fingers grazing my skin, even though I wasn't sure if they were real or if they were part of this nightmare, part of the trap. The room shifted again, the ground beneath me crumbling, disintegrating into nothing. The space stretched out, like I was being pulled in all directions at once. The light flickered. And in that fleeting moment, I saw it. I saw myself. My face. My eyes, hollow and dark. Just like them. I wasn't just part of the darkness anymore. I was the darkness. And then, the voices came again, louder now, surrounding me from all sides, their words piercing through my mind. Asterisk, welcome to eternity. Asterisk. And as I felt myself being pulled deeper into the dark, deeper into the void, I knew. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far worse. A cycle that would never break. A trap with no escape. No hope. No release. Just forever. And as the last flicker of light vanished into the abyss, I heard Michelle's voice one last time. Asterisk, you're one of us now. Asterisk. And in that moment, I realized the truth. I had never been alone. Not before. Not now. And I never would be again. The darkness was infinite. I couldn't tell where I ended, and where it began. It felt like being trapped in a dream, one that I couldn't wake up from, no matter how hard I tried. No matter how much I screamed. And I did scream. I screamed until my voice cracked, until my throat was raw and dry. But there was no sound. Just the oppressive silence of the void. The faces were gone now, the whispers too. But their presence lingered, heavy, suffocating. I could feel them watching me, even though I could no longer see them. I tried to move, to break free from the pull of the darkness, but it was like being bound by invisible chains. Every direction I turned, there was nothing but empty space. And then, a sound. It was faint at first, like a distant, muted echo. A knock. A soft, rhythmic knock. It wasn't just a sound. It was a presence, an awareness, tapping at the edges of my consciousness. I tried to ignore it, tried to push it out, but the knocking grew louder. Closer. Asterisk knock. Knock, asterisk. It was coming from all around me now, as if the walls themselves were vibrating with the force of it. I clutched my head, trying to block it out, but it was relentless. The darkness seemed to pulse with it, as if it were alive. Asterisk knock. Knock, asterisk. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to look. I turned, heart hammering in my chest, my breath shallow and ragged. And there, at the very edge of my vision, I saw it. A door. A door that hadn't been there before. It was made of old, rotting wood, its edges splintered and decaying. But it was there. And something about it, it felt familiar. Like I had seen it before. I couldn't help it. I moved toward it. Slowly. Cautiously. The knocking grew louder the closer I got. Asterisk knock. Knock, asterisk. I reached for the door handle. My fingers trembled as they touched the cold, metal knob. It felt like it was pulling me in, drawing me toward it. I didn't know why, but I couldn't stop myself. I twisted the knob. The door creaked open. And just beyond it, a blinding light. I stepped through, my heart racing. But the light wasn't warm. It was cold. A harsh, sterile white that felt unnatural. I blinked, adjusting my eyes, and then I saw it. The room. It wasn't like any room I had seen before. It was too clean, too perfect, like something out of a dream or a nightmare. White walls, white floors, white ceilings. Everything was too still. Too empty. And then I saw them. All of them. Michelle. The officer. Every face that had been lost in the darkness. They were all standing there, silent, staring at me. But this time, there was no escape. There was no doorway behind me. No way out. I could feel the room closing in, the walls shrinking, as if it were pressing me into a small, suffocating box. The knocking came again, but it wasn't from the door. It was coming from inside me. From deep inside. Asterisk knock. Knock, asterisk. And then I understood. I was never meant to leave. I had never been meant to leave. This place, this room, was not just a place. It was a waiting room. A space between life and death. Between time and eternity. I had entered the threshold. And now, I would stay here forever. A part of it. A part of them. Forever. The voices, Michelle's, the officers, everyone else, swirled around me, pulling me into the madness. Asterisk, you'll never leave. Asterisk. Asterisk, we are all trapped here. Asterisk. Asterisk welcome to eternity. Asterisk. And just like that, I understood. The knocking. The door. It wasn't a way out. It was a signal. A signal that I had crossed over. That I was one of them now. And as the last breath of air escaped my lungs, I heard Michelle's voice once more. Asterisk, you can never leave. Asterisk. And this time, it wasn't a whisper. It was a promise. The light around me flickered, sputtering like a dying flame, but there was no escape from it. No comfort in the silence that followed. The room pulsed with a strange energy, vibrating beneath my feet, as if the very air were alive. And then I saw it. A shape moving in the distance, shifting like a shadow, yet somehow more real than anything I had ever known. It was Michelle again. You are the story, they said, their voices rising in unison, thick with a strange power. Asterisk, you were always the story. Asterisk. I wanted to resist. To fight against it. But there was nothing to fight. No enemy to oppose. Just the truth. Just the darkness. The door was still there, faintly visible in the distance, but I couldn't see the light beyond it anymore. All I saw now was nothing. Just the endless black, stretching further than I could comprehend. It wasn't the oppressive darkness I had known before. It was something worse. It was empty. It was cold. It was waiting. And in that waiting, I felt the strange, horrible comfort of knowing that I had become part of it. I had become part of the endless cycle that would never end. The knock came again, but this time, it wasn't distant. It was inside me. Asterisk knock. Knock. Knock, asterisk. I felt it in my chest, in the pit of my stomach. The sound echoed in my bones. Someone else was approaching. Another would soon enter this place, unaware of what awaited them. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't angry. I was just here. Just part of it. And as the knock came again, louder, more urgent, I understood. It would never stop. The waiting. The knocking. The cycles. Each time a new soul arrived, the door would open. And they would step through. They would become part of the story. And the story would continue, folding in on itself, forever. I could feel the presence growing closer now. The new soul, stepping closer to the door, drawn in like all the rest. Their footsteps reverberated in the vast emptiness, like an inevitable march. The figure stood just beyond the threshold, looking out into the vast blackness, unaware of what waited for them. Unaware that they were already becoming part of it. The door opened. The light bled through, harsh and cold, casting long shadows across the room. And in that moment, I realized something that I couldn't deny. I wasn't just trapped here. I was this place. I was the door. I was the cycle. I was the waiting. The dark had consumed me, and now, I was part of it forever. The next soul stepped through. And I was there. Watching. Waiting. Forever. The door closed with a soft thud, and the silence returned. But this time, it wasn't the same. There was no comfort in it. No rest. Just the cold, hollow echo of another step taken. Another soul claimed. I could feel their presence, faint but unmistakable. The new one, the one who had just crossed the threshold, was here now. And they, like all the others before them, would soon become a part of this. This endless, unyielding story. They would join the whispers. The waiting. The dark. And I was still here. I was still part of it. I was no longer just a witness. I was a part of the very fabric that wove this place together. The cycle had consumed me entirely. I could feel the others around me now, feel their presence, their lost souls whispering just beyond the veil. Their voices, so many of them, blending into a constant murmur that never stopped, never faded. Asterisk, you're one of us now. Asterisk. Asterisk, we are all waiting. Asterisk. I could sense the weight of their eyes, unseen but always there, pressing down on me, as if they were judging me for what I had become. But I didn't care anymore. I didn't feel the same sharp pang of regret that I had when I first arrived. The anger, the fear, they were gone, stripped away by the years, or perhaps by the centuries that had passed. Time meant nothing here. The feeling of being lost, of being alone, was fading. Slowly. But it was fading. Because now, I understood. There was no me anymore. I was just a part of this place. Just another soul bound to the cycle. In the cycle, it was everything. Every knock, every whisper, every flicker of light, every step that crossed the threshold, it was all part of the same pattern. The same endless loop. The story never ended. And as the figure who had crossed the door before me began to fade into the shadows, I saw it clearly for the first time. It wasn't about escape. It wasn't about finding a way out. There was no way out. There never was. The door wasn't meant to release us. It was meant to draw us in, to trap us in this unending dance with the dark. The new soul was already changing, their form shifting, blending with the others. They would no longer be who they once were. They would forget. And they would join the cycle. We are one, the voices whispered again, softer now, almost tender. I wanted to scream, to reach out and warn them. But I couldn't. I couldn't speak. I had become too much a part of this place, too much a part of the waiting. And as the figure merged with the others, becoming just another shadow in the endless sea of lost souls, I felt a strange peace settle over me. A peace I had never thought I would find. Because now I understood. We were all bound to this place. To this cycle. Forever. And the waiting was all that was left. The door would open again. Someone else would cross through. And the cycle would continue. Forever. And in that final moment, when the last flicker of light had faded completely, I realized that I was no longer just waiting for them. I was part of them. I was the next. And the next. And the next. Forever. The endless waiting, the perpetual cycle, wrapped around me like a suffocating shroud. But it was no longer terrifying. Not in the way it once was. Now, there was just a quiet, inevitable acceptance. I had become the cycle. And as the new soul, still a blur, still indistinct, drifted further into the dark, I felt the shift again. The shift I knew all too well. It was the moment when they ceased to be themselves and began to fade into us. Into the story. They would feel it soon enough, the shift in their thoughts, the weight in their chest. The feeling that something inside them was slowly shifting, like their very being was being unraveled and rewoven into something else. Something darker. And then, just as it had happened to me, they would begin to hear the whispers. The endless, echoing voices. Asterisk, we are all one now. Asterisk. Asterisk, you were always meant to be here. Asterisk. They would hear it. Feel it. And they would understand. There was no escape. No end. Just an eternal waiting, an endless loop of souls trapped together, bound by the same dark force. I could feel the pull of it again, the pull toward the door. Not to leave. But to join. I was no longer standing at the threshold, watching the next soul step through. I had become part of that endless procession. The figure who had just crossed wasn't the next one. I was. The door had opened for me once, and now it opened for another. It would open forever. As I drifted in the dark, I could almost hear the doors creak again. Faint but familiar. The cycle was constant. I had crossed through it. I was part of it. And now, the waiting would never stop. Not for me. Not for anyone. Forever. And somewhere, deep within the endless night, I understood. There was no release. No end. No freedom. I wasn't just lost in the dark. I was the dark. The cycle had no end because it was never meant to. The whispers swelled again, louder, merging together into one, a voice that was all of us, and yet none of us at the same time. Asterisk, you will never leave. Asterisk. Asterisk, you are always here. Asterisk. And I felt myself sink deeper, deeper into the void, into the waiting. Into the never-ending story. Forever. And somewhere in the distance, I could hear it again. Asterisk, knock. Knock, asterisk. And I knew. The next one was coming. The cycle was beginning again. And I was waiting. Forever. The knock echoed through the endless void, reverberating deep inside me. Asterisk, knock. Knock, asterisk. It wasn't a sound anymore. It was a presence, a force that resonated with the very core of my being. I could feel it, its weight, its urgency. It wasn't distant. It wasn't something happening outside of me. It was happening within. The door, always just beyond reach, always on the edge of my perception, appeared again. It was different now, more real, more tangible than before. But it wasn't a door of wood or metal, not in the physical sense. It was a door of thought, a door made of the very fabric of this place. And I knew. I knew what it meant. The next soul was approaching. The next soul was coming through. But this time, it felt different. I felt different. The endless cycle that had once held me, terrified me, had begun to unravel something deep within me. It wasn't just the waiting anymore. It wasn't just the dark. Something inside me had shifted. The whispers were louder now, swirling around me like a chorus of voices from all the lost souls who had come before. Their words bled together, became one. Asterisk, you are the story. Asterisk. Asterisk, you are the beginning, and the end. Asterisk. It wasn't just the voices anymore. It was their presence, each one of them, merging with mine, blending together until there was no distinction, no separation. We were one. We had always been one. I could feel the new soul coming closer, feel their confusion, their fear, as they neared the door. They didn't know what awaited them, just as I hadn't known when I first arrived. They couldn't know. Not yet. I could sense them just beyond the threshold, their hand trembling as they reached for the door, their breath sharp and panicked. But it wouldn't matter. They would step through. They had to. It was already decided. They had already become part of the cycle, even if they hadn't fully realized it yet. Asterisk, knock. Knock, asterisk. The sound grew louder now, more insistent. The door was opening. The light bled through once more, harsh and bright, and the figures stepped forward, their shape flickering like a shadow, unsure and distant. I could feel them. I could feel their arrival like a jolt of electricity coursing through the void. And I knew what was coming. I knew. They would cross the threshold, and in doing so, they would lose themselves. They would join us. Join the waiting, the cycle. There would be no escape. No release. Just the endless, perpetual loop. And then, a thought struck me, cold and sudden. What if there was no next one? What if the door stopped opening? What if the cycle ceased to continue? The thought was fleeting, almost laughable. But it lingered just long enough for me to feel the chill. Because I realized something in that moment. There was no next soul. There never was. We were the cycle. We were the waiting. I was the cycle. There would be no more knocking. No more souls stepping through. Just the endless, infinite dark. And then, the realization hit me with the force of a storm. I wasn't waiting for the next one. I was the next one. I was the cycle. The waiting. The knocking. The story had no end because I was its beginning and its end. And as the door creaked open, I knew with a finality that left no room for doubt. There was no more waiting. No more wondering. No more searching. There was just this, just me, and the endless cycle that would never stop. Forever. The light from the door bled out, casting sharp shadows against the void. But I didn't step forward. I was the threshold now. The door opened, but I didn't cross it. I didn't need to. Because I had become the door. The soft, familiar knock echoed again, this time, not from outside, but from within. Asterisk knock. Knock, asterisk. It wasn't a sound. It was a pulse, a heartbeat. It was the rhythm of the cycle. And I understood then. I was the cycle. I wasn't waiting for anyone. I wasn't watching from the sidelines anymore. I was the very core of this place. The door wasn't just a way in. It was a way through. It wasn't just the beginning of a new cycle. It was the end of all cycles. And yet, the cycle never stopped. It never would. It couldn't. I could feel the presence of the next one drawing near, the new soul hovering at the threshold, trembling with confusion. But they weren't just coming toward me. They were becoming me. Their heartbeat quickened. Their breath shallow. And just as the others had, they would lose themselves. They would forget. The door, this door, wasn't just a way to another place. It was a way to become part of this place. To become part of the endless cycle. The cycle wasn't something that existed outside of me anymore. It was in me. I was it. And I felt it now, felt the pull toward the light, felt the pressure building behind my ribs, as though the light itself was trying to force its way into my soul. But there was no more fear. No more resistance. No more wondering. There was only the truth. The truth of the story. The truth of me. And as the light grew brighter, filling the void, something inside me shifted once more. I wasn't just becoming part of the story. I was becoming the story. The story wasn't about what came before, or what would come after. It was about this. About this moment. About the eternal loop that bound us all together. The knocking was louder now. Asterisk knock. Knock. Knock, asterisk. I felt it in my chest. The presence was near. I could feel their soul just beyond the threshold, about to step into the same trap I had. And yet, I wasn't afraid anymore. I was just part of it now. The cycle had no end, no beginning. It was simply a now. A forever now. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't watching anyone else cross through the door. I was the one waiting for myself. The door swung wide. And I stepped through. Into the light. Into the dark. Forever. The cycle began again. And we were the story now. Forever. The door closed softly behind me, the sound fading into the thick, oppressive silence. But even as the door shut, I felt its presence, its pull, still lingering in the air. I wasn't free. I hadn't escaped. I had merely shifted. The darkness around me was now sharper, more real. It wasn't just the void anymore. It was a part of me. Every inch of it. I could feel it, feel the weight of it in my chest, in the pit of my stomach, like an ancient pressure that had always been there, always been waiting. I had crossed the threshold, yes. But I had become the threshold. I wasn't just part of the cycle anymore. I was the cycle. I could hear the faint whisper of the knock again, distant but clear, as though it were calling from the deepest corners of the void. Asterisk knock. Knock. Knock, asterisk. It wasn't a sound. It was a vibration. A pulse. A heartbeat. But this time, I didn't fear it. I didn't feel lost or confused or hopeless. I felt a strange, awful clarity. The cycle wasn't something outside of me. It wasn't something I could run from. It wasn't a door to be opened and closed at will. It wasn't a passage. It wasn't a story. It was me. It had always been me. The knock came again, louder now, more insistent. But I no longer needed to step through. I was the door. I was the threshold. I was the waiting. And the waiting had no end. I could feel the pull of the new soul, faint but there, a presence hovering at the edge of the darkness. They didn't know yet, but they would soon become part of the cycle. They would cross the threshold, just as I had. They would lose themselves to the void, to the waiting. I couldn't stop them. I was them. I could feel their steps drawing closer now, their heartbeat syncing with mine. They would come through. They would become part of the eternal story. And we, would wait. Forever. Because in this place, there was no end. There was no beginning. There was only the endless loop. The cycle that would never stop. And as the knock came again, closer, louder, insistent, I realized the horrible truth. I wasn't waiting for anyone anymore. I had become the next. Forever. The knocking stopped. A suffocating silence hung in the air, thicker than it had ever been before. For a moment, I thought I could breathe. Thought I could escape the crushing weight of everything I had become. But I couldn't. The darkness was all around me. Not just in front of me, but inside me, woven into every thought, every breath. I was the darkness now. I had become part of the story. The cycle. And there was no way out. I could feel it, the pull of the door, the force of its inevitability. The cycle was always waiting, always turning, like a clock with no hands, ticking endlessly forward. It didn't matter who had crossed the threshold before. It didn't matter who would cross it after. I was part of it now. The whispers returned, low and soft, like the distant murmur of 1,000 lost souls. Asterisk, you are the story. Asterisk. Asterisk, you are the waiting. Asterisk. I knew what they meant now. I wasn't watching anymore. I wasn't even part of the waiting. I was the waiting. The very essence of it. The door, the one that had once been a place of fear, of mystery, of escape, was now just another symbol, just another part of the cycle. And as the light flickered in the distance, I understood. It wasn't the light I feared. It wasn't the darkness. It was the endlessness. The cycle would continue without end. There was no escape. No release. No finality. There was only the waiting. And I was both the waiter and the waiting. I was the door. I was the threshold. And as the next knock began, distant at first, but growing closer, stronger, I realized the truth. It wasn't a story anymore. It was a trap. The next soul would step through. And I would wait. Forever. And so it would continue. The endless knocking, the endless waiting. The cycle would never stop. Because the story was never over. It was only just beginning. Forever.